August 1923, a mountain called Cappadocia on the Black Sea coast of Turkey. Three men climb a narrow stone stairway carved into a cliff face. Below them, a 300-meter drop into a river valley. Above them, a monastery that has stood on this rock since the year 386. One of them is the abbot. His name is Jeremias. Tonight he is going to bury God, not a metaphor, an object, a 1,500-year-old icon of the Virgin Mary, painted, according to the monks who have guarded it for 60 generations, by the hand of Saint Luke himself. Jeremias wraps it in cloth. He wraps a handwritten gospel beside it. He wraps a fragment of the true cross, a gift from an emperor who has been dead for 500 years. He digs a hole in the floor of a small chapel a kilometer from the monastery, and he puts them in the ground. He believes he is coming back. He is wrong. By the end of this story, you will understand exactly what was buried on that mountain and why the woman who should have inherited that mountain's faith never got the chance to say goodbye to it at all. To understand what was lost, you have to understand what was allowed. In 1461, Sultan Mehmed II, the same conqueror who had taken Constantinople 8 years earlier, marched into Trebizond, the last free fragment of the Byzantine Empire, and extinguished it. Most conquerors erase what came before. Mehmed did something colder. He let it live on a leash. The Christian monastery in the cliffs above Trebizond, the one where Jeremias would one day bury an icon, was granted the Sultan's protection that same year, not out of mercy, out of arithmetic. A Christian population that paid its taxes, stayed in its churches, and caused no trouble was worth more alive than dead. The Ottomans called this the millet system, a patchwork empire where Greeks, Armenians, and Assyrians were permitted to keep their priests, their liturgies, their monasteries, so long as they paid the jizya, the tax levied on non-Muslims, and never forgot which empire they were guests in. Guests for 460 years. Picture a Christian village in the Cappadocian interior, not the coast, not Trebizond, but deep inland where the rock itself had been hollowed out into churches 1,000 years earlier. Here lived the Ottomanaldes, Orthodox Christians who no longer even spoke Greek. They wrote their prayers in Turkish using the Greek alphabet because the Greek alphabet was sacred and the language it recorded no longer was. Read that again. These were Christians who had lost their own tongue and kept only the shape of the letters. That's the world a nun was born into. Not persecution in every generation, protection when it suited the empire, and violence when it didn't. A convent could stand untouched for 2 centuries and then have its gate broken down in a single afternoon. One woman's story survives in enough detail to show you exactly how that worked. Her name was Philothei, and she is the closest thing this story has to a martyr with a face. Philothei was born in Athens in 1522, Ottoman Athens, 69 years after the fall of Constantinople, into a wealthy family named Venizelos. She did not choose the convent first. Her family chose a marriage for her, and by every surviving account, it was a brutal one. She was widowed at 19. A widow in the Ottoman Greek world had 2 doors open to her, remarriage or the church. Philothei walked through the second door and never looked back. What she built next is almost impossible to picture against the world she was building it in. She founded not 1 but 2 women's monasteries, dedicated, according to the accounts, in response to a vision of Saint Andrew the Apostle. Inside the walls of one, she built a hospital, beside it a hostel for the poor, and then she did something that should have gotten her killed on the spot. She began sheltering women who had been taken captive by raiders and slave traders operating under Ottoman authority, Christian women who had nowhere else in the empire to go. A convent in Philothei's hands stopped being a place of quiet withdrawal from the world. It became a safe house. The empire noticed. One day, Muslim men stormed into her monastery and beat her, an abbess, inside her own church in front of her own nuns. She survived that assault. She did not survive what came after. Philothei was killed for the sanctuary she had built. A woman woman punished not for a crime, but for a door she refused to close. Here is the question this video wants you to sit with. If this is what happened to a nun in Athens, in the most visible Christian city under Ottoman rule, protected by wealth and a founding family name, what was happening unrecorded in the convents nobody was writing about, in the Cappadocian interior, in the Pontic mountains, in the cave churches where no chronicler ever thought to write anything down at all? That silence is not the absence of a story, it's the story.
Central Anatolia holds one of the strangest religious landscapes on Earth, Cappadocia, where volcanic rock is soft enough to carve like clay, and Christian communities spent centuries doing exactly that. Entire underground cities, churches with no exterior at all, invisible from 50 feet away, frescoes painted onto ceilings that took 1,000 years to be discovered by anyone outside the faith. This wasn't decoration, it was survival architecture. A monastery you can see from a valley floor is a monastery that can be taxed, controlled, converted, or burned. A monastery carved into a cliff face, reachable by a single hidden stairway behind a rock-cut door that looks like the mountain itself. That is a monastery built by people who had already learned the hard way what visibility cost them. Picture a woman entering religious life in one of these communities in, say, 1750. She takes vows in a chapel lit only by oil lamps, its ceiling covered in the faces of saints painted by monks 4 centuries dead. She will spend the rest of her life inside rock that once was the floor of an ancient seabed. She will speak Turkish in the marketplace and Greek, or a fading memory of Greek, in prayer. She will pay, indirectly through her community, a tax that exists for the single reason that she was born to the wrong faith in the wrong empire. And she will do all of this in near total documentary silence. We have architectural records, we have tax registers, we do not have her name. This is the pattern the entire video keeps circling back to. The Ottoman Empire kept meticulous records of what Christian communities owed. It kept almost none of what Christian women inside those communities lived. Now hold that image next to the mountain where we began, Sumela, because that monastery, the one with the buried icon, did have an associated life for women in its orbit, tied to it by faith, by geography, by the same millet system that governed every Christian institution in the empire. And what happened to Sumela in the 20th century is what happened to every one of these communities, convents included, whether the history books remembered the women or not.
Sumela Monastery is not a metaphor for Ottoman Christian survival. It is the single best documented case study of it. Built in 386 AD, according to monastic tradition, hollowed into a cliff 1,200 meters up in the Pontic Mountains, it survived Byzantine collapse, survived the fall of Trebizond in 1461, and then survived something stranger, 462 years as a tolerated guest inside an empire that had every legal right to erase it and repeatedly chose not to. Mehmed II protected it. Later sultans renewed that protection. By the 1680s, the monastery was even home to a respected Greek educational institution, teaching inside the same walls where monks prayed, Muslim pilgrims and Christian pilgrims climbing the same stairway to the same holy spring, coexisting in a way that complicates every simple story you've ever been told about this empire. But protection granted by a sultan's whim is not permanence. It's a lease that can be canceled without notice. The cancellation notice came in 1916, when Russian forces occupied Trebizond during the First World War. For 2 years, the region was a war zone, and the monastery's centuries of continuity cracked for the first time in living memory. When the Russians withdrew in 1918, nothing went back to normal, because normal for the Ottoman Empire itself no longer existed. The empire that had granted this protection in 1461 collapsed within 5 years of the Russians leaving, and when an empire collapses, every arrangement built on its goodwill collapses with it. Here's the mini hook worth sitting with. The monks of Sumela were about to lose 4.5 centuries of continuity in less time than it takes to read this sentence aloud. What replaced the Ottoman millet system would not offer them a choice to stay. It would offer them a train ticket and a deadline. The Treaty of Lausanne. On paper, it is a diplomatic document ending a war between Greece and the new Turkish Republic. In practice, it is one of the largest forced population transfers in modern history. Over 1 million Orthodox Christians from Anatolia sent to Greece. Hundreds of thousands of Muslims from Greece sent the other direction. Sorted not by language, not by where their families had lived for 1,000 years, but religion alone. The Karamanlides, the Turkish-speaking Orthodox Christians of Cappadocia, the descendants of Byzantines who had forgotten Greek but never forgot their faith, were expelled to a Greece where they didn't speak the language of the country receiving them. Convents that had stood, hidden in rock for 1,000 years, emptied in a matter of weeks. And on the Pontic coast, the monks of Sumela received the same order: leave now, take nothing. This is where the cold open closes its loop. The departing clergy were forbidden from carrying monastery property with them across the border, so Abbot Jeremias and his monks made a choice that has haunted Pontic Greek memory for a century. Rather than let the icon of the Panagia, the one attributed to St. Luke, the one that had drawn pilgrims up that cliff stairway for 1,500 years, fall into looters' hands, they buried it in the floor of a small chapel dedicated to St. Barbara, roughly a kilometer from the monastery, in an iron chest, alongside the handwritten gospel and the fragment of the true cross. They believed, genuinely, that this exile was temporary, that the world would right itself and they would climb that stairway again. They never did. Sumela sat empty. Tobacco smugglers used its abandoned halls. Around 1930, a fire gutted parts of the complex. Treasure hunters, drawn by rumor, not fact, tore through its floors for a decade, searching for exactly what Jeremias had buried. In 1931, Greece was finally granted permission to recover what the monks had hidden. The task fell to a former monk of Sumela himself, a man named Ambrosios, selected by the exiled metropolitan of Trabzon, Chrysanthos. Ambrosios climbed the same mountain his community had fled 8 years earlier and dug up the icon his abbot had buried in the dark. It now sits in a rebuilt monastery on a mountainside in northern Greece, a replica of home built by people who could never go home again. That is the fate of the monks, documented, named, mourned in books, in documentaries, on UNESCO tentative heritage lists. Now ask the question this entire video has been building toward. Where is the equivalent record for the women? The convents of the Karamanlides, hollowed into Cappadocian rock over 1,000 years, were emptied in the same treaty, in the same year, by the same trains. No Ambrosios climbed a mountain to recover what they left behind, because no one thought to write down what they had, who they were, or where they went. Philothei's story survived because she was wealthy, urban, and violent enough in her defiance that chroniclers couldn't look away. Every quieter version of her, every nun in every hidden rock chapel from Trabzon to the Cappadocian interior, vanished from the record at the exact same moment she vanished from the mountain. The monastery's disappearance was a tragedy. The convent's disappearance was closer to an unwitnessed death. Here is the gut punch this story has been walking towards since the mountain, the buried icon, and the abbot who believed he was coming home. Jeremias buried an object, an icon, a gospel, a relic, physical things that could be dug up again in 1931 by a man who remembered exactly where they were because someone had bothered to write it down. Nobody buried the record of the women. There was no iron chest for the names of the nuns who ran the hidden hospital wards of Cappadocian convents, no coordinates left behind for future historians to recover, no exiled monk with an incentive to climb a mountain and dig them back up. When the trains left in 1923,
They carried real living women who had spent their lives inside walls built specifically because visibility was dangerous, and the same silence that had once protected those women from Ottoman raiders became permanently the silence that erased them from history. Philothei is the exception that proves this. She is remembered today, centuries later, precisely because her life was loud enough, urban enough, dangerous enough to force chroniclers to notice her, sheltering captive women, building a hospital inside a convent wall, dying for the sanctuary she refused to shut down. She is not an outlier because her courage was rare. She is an outlier because her documentation was rare. For every Philothei whose name survived, an unknown number of women who lived the same defiance, took the same risks, sheltered the same captives in convents nobody bothered to chronicle, are gone as completely as if they had never existed at all. The monastery on the mountain got a rescue mission in 1931. The convents in the rock got a train ticket and silence. That is the actual secret this video promised you, not a hidden scandal, a hidden erasure. One empire's bureaucratic indifference compounding into a historical amnesia so complete that we can name the icon buried under a chapel floor, and we cannot name the woman who might have prayed in front of it the week before she was forced onto a train and never came home.
Every empire leaves two kinds of ruins. The kind you can still see, cliffs, stairways, buried treasure, frescoes restored by conservationists a century later, and the kind you can't see at all because no one thought the people living inside them were worth writing down. Sumela's buried icon was recovered because someone had a reason and a map to bring it back into the light. The convents of Ottoman Anatolia had no map. Their recovery, if it happens at all, depends entirely on historians willing to dig through tax registers and property deeds, looking for the names an empire never thought worth recording as anything more than a line item on a jizya ledger. Next time, we go back to Cappadocia itself, to the last Christian convent standing in the region by the time the Ottoman Empire breathed its final breath, and the choice its final Mother Superior made the night soldiers arrived at a door that had held for 1,000 years. Subscribe now, because that story has a name attached to it, and once you hear what she did, you will understand why some doors are worth dying to keep closed. Some mountains give their secrets back. Most women never get that chance.